In today's video, we're going to talk about setting your drums up in an ergonomic fashion in an easy to play way. The first thing I want you to take notice of is when you look at the drum setup, you're going to see that everything is fairly compact. Okay, so like the cymbals, for example, if I start right here and go across, notice that they never really come too much above this plane right here. The drums, if you look at the snare drum over to my left, the snare drum in the center, and the floor tom, if you sat behind the kit, you would notice that's pretty much all parallel with each other. So a lot of times when I work with students, the first thing I notice is that the snare drum is oftentimes too low. And what happens with that is that when you go to play your snare drum, if it's too low, the drumstick, instead of it being parallel with the drumstick will end up in this position, which really inhibits a lot of the rebound you can get from the stick coming off the snare. So when we think about going from point A to point B across the drums, we want to remember that the quickest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So if I'm going to go from my snare drum to my floor tom, I don't want to have my snare drum down lower and have to almost play the snare drum down here and reach up just to get up to the floor tom. Same thing applies if I want to go around the drums nice and easy. Okay, if you have your drum set up in a way where maybe the rack tom is positioned too flat in front of you, you're going to have to go from the snare drum more outward like this, whereas if you have your tom right above your snare, much easier to play. One thing I want to focus on too is just think about what your basic overall instruments of the drum set are that you're going to be using the most. And those are primarily going to be the bass drum, the snare drum, the hi-hat, and the ride cymbal. And the reason why I have my drum set up in this basic way here today is so you can see that my ride cymbal is just beyond this shoulder right here. So when I play my ride, I don't have to use too much energy. Sometimes I work with people and maybe the ride cymbal is up here, you know, too far, or a lot of guys tend to play the ride cymbal over here and then you get cramped up and here you're too tight. You want your body to be able to breathe. So you have your ride cymbal right here. I can get up to my bell real easy. Don't have to do too much work. If I'm going to play my crash, I'll just play here for a second. So if I'm playing, just real nice and easy. Same thing if I want to come from my ride cymbal over to my crash over here. You see it's just real simple to get over here. Things aren't placed awkwardly, okay? In thinking about just your basic setup of what you're going to be using the most, I sometimes will work with some students who I just can think of a student recently who got a brand new drum set and he was really excited because he had 3 toms up top now, which is great and can be a lot of fun. But one thing I recommended to him when I saw his setup was he then put his cymbals in a different setup in favor of those toms up here. And what I reminded him of was that you're going to be using that ride cymbal a lot more than just that one little tom over here. So a good rule to follow is first start with the things you're going to use the most frequently and build around there. I remember there was a video that Neil Peart released years ago and he even showed his basic setup without all of the extra stuff. And you know, obviously he's got drums all up here and his electronics behind him, but his basic setup was a simple 4-piece ride cymbal down here, and then he kind of showed in little steps how he built up around there. And one of the reasons why, if you look at his kit, he has some of those toms up here is because he didn't want them to get in the way of something like his main rack tom. So the overall theme is that set your drums up in an easy way to play, and we'll look at some other videos then when we'll think about your snare drum placement, seat height, and all that good stuff.